just going to go over what we do. We've been at this for the last 8 years now. So we've learned a few things on the way, and maybe there's some very experienced growers and not so experienced. So I'm sure there's some bits that people will get from it anyway. So we grow on about half an acre. So this is our prop tunnel here, and it's 5 by 7 meters, which is sufficient for what we need. Just outside there on the right is a hardening off area that we have. And this used to be on the ground. It was pallets on the ground, but we moved it up off the ground just because it was easier to cut the grass around it and stuff like that. So, and then just outside the tunnel there on the ground, we used to use the baths. That can fit 3 trays at a time for soaking. But this basin on the ground, that only takes one, but we have two of those. So I use two of those at the time. But that's kind of the general setup outside the tunnel. And I'll talk about watering and stuff like that later. So this is the layout of the tunnel. In the center, we have our heat benches. There's two big heat benches there in the middle. And we have those in the middle because it's the warmest part of the tunnel, and everything's on that first to germinate. And then as soon as everything germinates, we take it off and put it on the side benches there. So this is underneath the heat benches. We have space for all our trays, which is really handy. They don't get wet. We can keep them dry, and we usually clean them before we put them back into the underneath and stack them up. So it's just a really clever use of space. It's a small space, but we use it well. And you can see the ground there is covered with Mypex, so we don't get any weeds, even though you can see a few little ones there at the bottom. But yeah, generally it's like kept clean, and yeah, efficient use of space. And then this is to the left as you walk in the tunnel. It's our sowing area. So that's just big enough to fit 2 trays and the compost that I need to work with. And these are all made from stuff that we had lying around, or stuff that we can get for free, really. We didn't put any expense into making any of these things. And we were able to just do it ourselves. And my father is very good. He has everything that we need in his tool shed, so I can use those things as well. So underneath the sowing area is space for the compost bags, and then there's space to the right where I can keep the open compost bags as well. And yeah, so it's just good use of space there as well. That's a fairly sturdy table. And so these are our heat benches in the middle. Then, as I said, we used just bits of wood that we had lying around and put this together. We're dealing with a very slopey site, so that's actually level. You wouldn't think it was, but yeah, so that's what we're dealing with. So that's the frame that we made first, and then we put some ply then on top, and we had an old wardrobe that we took apart and put up the walls around the side of that. And then we laid down some sheets of insulation. I think it was 1.5 inch insulation boards on top of this ply here. And then you lay down 3 inches of your sand, and then these heat cables that we get from Fruital Farm, they go along there, and then 1.5 inch of sand then on top of that. And you're ready to go. And these are the thermostats as well from Fruital Farm. So that's kind of the setup for the heat benches in the middle, which are really important in your prop tunnel. And then our side benches that we made, we got these bars from the guy that we bought our 2 secondhand tunnels from. He was a mushroom grower, so he threw in all of these things for free, and they've been really handy. Well, not for free, we paid for them, but we got loads of them. And we just use these little steel tapes at the bottom, and they're brilliant, and on some 3x2s. And we bought those plastic pallets from a fella in Tullow. They were a tenner each at the time, and they're great because they're like clean. They don't they'll last forever, and it's a really sturdy space, and it can take a lot of trays there as well. So that's really handy. And then underneath, actually, oops, where did I go there? Yeah, you've got all the space as well for bits of stuff that you might use at a later point. And then our trays that we use, we get from Fruital Farm. We only use 150s and 96s. We have 77s and we have the deep 150s, but we don't use those anymore. So we use the 150s for everything. We sow everything into the 150s. You can see on the right there, there's bullswood, and we've spinach as well, goes into them. We used to sow the spinach into 77s. But I think you use more compost in those things and it's completely unnecessary. And I'll talk about feed and how I feed the trays later. But yeah, the 150s are totally fine and you're using less compost. And then the tomatoes and all the other like heat loving plants, they can all be sown into 150s and then potted up into the 96s. So yeah, and all of those are available from Fruital Farm. And then the compost that we use is Classman from Fruital Farm. We use peat-free seed compost and potting compost. And I'll talk about how I use those later as well. So this is how we sow. So the sowing area here, what I do is, depending on what I'm sowing, I'll use different mixes of compost. So if I was sowing lettuce, I would use, say, 3/4 of a bag of seed compost and 1/4 of a bag of potting compost, or it could be half and half, depending on what fell out of the bag at the time. But I'd lift it up and put it on top of that's a very deep table. So I can just mix it all together with my hands. I usually have like a pair of plastic gloves or something to keep my hands warm if it's like wintertime or whatever. But I'll just make sure that I get all the lumps out of it, and then I'll do 3 movements where I grab the 3 big massive pieces of compost and I pull it back over the trays, and or 2 with my 2 hands, sorry, and I do that 3 times. So it's like 3 movements, and that's it. And then I use the lat then to scrape across any of the compost on top, so you'll see there what it looks like after I've scraped it off. And then I'll gently just grab the tray and I'll lift each tray like a few inches off and just drop it so that the compost drops down. And then I'll put those on the ground, and then when I've got 8 of them on the ground like this, I'll just water them on the ground, and then I'll stack them up on the side behind me. And if I'll put them all in stacks, if I'm doing like 5 trays of spinach or 7 trays of lettuce or whatever, I'll keep them in order like that so I can keep track of what I'm doing. And I'll have my notebook there. And then I use this push out plate. Then I take 2 trays at a time and I put them back on the compost area, and I just gently press that in to create a bit of a recess. And then that's where I'll sow that's how, I'll just create it so it's easier for the seeds to stay in there. So I'll always have a plastic container in the prop tunnel that I keep dry. And if I'm using big seeds like spinach, I'll pour them into it and I'll just sprinkle it across. And usually 3 seeds per cell there. Or if I'm doing like baby leaf, I'll have them in my hand like that. And I'll always have a towel in the prop tunnel so I can keep my hands dry, because I'm going to be putting the seeds back into the bags, and I don't want wet seeds going back in, or I don't want to handle wet, or I don't want to handle the paper packets with my wet hands. So I just keep really tidy there and make sure that I'm looking after the seeds well. So, and I also have a method for lettuce where lettuce seed, if I'm doing say Saragossa or something like that, I'll fold the seed packet so that I've got a sharp edge, and I'll put the seed into that, and I'll use a toothpick then just to push a seed into each individual cell, which is very time consuming. So that's probably why we mostly use pelleted seed, because it's much quicker. But sometimes some varieties that are really good, we can't get them pelleted. So we'll just we'll do it that way. So then these are the 150s then as well. These are tomatoes. So I've sowed the tomatoes into the 150s, and then I'll fill up a 96 and I'll just push out all of the tomato seedlings, and I'll leave them draped across on top. And then it's a really quick method then of just 3 moves of, I push my finger into the compost, slip in the seedling, and then just push the compost back around the seedling. It's really quick. And then I'll just sprinkle some more compost across, and I'll shake the tray and let all the extra compost fall in. And then I'll soak that tray. And then I'll put this is the microgreens room here that we have. So when I'm starting off any of the heat loving plants, I'll have those started in the microgreen rooms until they've grown in the 96s, and then I'll bring them out to the prop tunnel and pot them up into the bigger pots. But just when it's kind of early in the year and I don't want to be minding them out in the prop tunnel, it's handy because the microgreens room is right beside where we live. So yeah, so then this is an example. These have just been potted up from the 96s. Once they kind of start to crowd each other out, then it's they're fine then to pot up into these, and I'll use potting compost for that, and then they'll be fine until I have to transplant them in May. But I'll just show you here in the prop tunnel. So I what do you call it? Yeah, so this is the heat bench then, and I got these bamboo things. I leave those steel straps on the side, and I just take the bamboos away or put them back because I need them every year. And I just tighten them, stick them in there and tighten it, and then they're down quite low because I'll put all the seed or all the pots in there, and I'll drape the fleece over the whole lot, and then as the plants grow I'll lift up the bamboos. And yeah, that's just really, I'll just keep that there for April then, and they'll be nice and cozy in there, and until we're transplanting them into the tunnels in May. And what I also do then, like, so these 2 heat benches will be full of all the plants that are going to go into the tunnels in the summer, like aubergines and peppers and everything. And I'll keep everything in separate crates, and like the different varieties, because it's easy to kind of get mixed up, and rather than label every pot, I just put one variety into one crate, and then I can take up, and the crate sits on top of the heat bench, and then I can lift up the crate and I can put it into the tray to soak it into the basin that I have outside to soak it. So that's really handy. It's really quick, and I can put it all back onto the heat bench then and cover them all over. If it gets really hot later, I can take the fleece off during the day, but I'll cover it up during the night. I just want to keep these really happy. I don't want them stressed. So that's how you raise really good plants, I think, for the tunnels in the summer. And then for watering, you can water in the morning or the evenings, and then on Fridays I soak the trays because I don't want to be thinking about this at the weekend. I want to have time off, and so I make sure that everything's soaked on the Friday, and I don't have to worry about it unless it's really, really hot weather. Then obviously you would have to water, but yeah. So yeah, basically in the mornings or the evenings, and don't be afraid to push the plugs out and have a look and check and lift the trays, and you'll know by weight if they need to be soaked or whatever. So these plugs here, I would have overhead watered those until this point now. They're still kind of small. Maybe they're probably 3 weeks there, I'd say. And yeah, so you can see here, they're all dry in the middle. And rather than me trying to overhead water these, and like you can see that some just never get enough water, I find. And I find with the peat-free compost as well, they do kind of tend to need a bit more watering. They don't stay as they don't hold the water like the peat compost. So outside I've got this basin, as I said before. I have another one as well, so I can do 2 at a time. I would like to set this up a bit better. I think, like, going forward, we probably will move our prop tunnel at some point so it's not on such a slope, and we'll get our water all sorted properly, and I'll have two of these basins inside the tunnel. We'll probably make the tunnel a bit bigger as well. So I'll put the 2 basins in there so I can keep the water a bit warm with the proper drain and everything. At the moment, we're just pouring that out in the ground when we're not using it. So yeah, when the plugs get about this big, I'll soak them and I'll feed them because I want them to be really strong, especially in the shoulder seasons. When you're putting them into the ground, there's a threat of flea beetle and leather jackets always. So I want really strong plants, and I'll always have loads of replacements on at the same time that I can replace them. And yeah, and then like about a couple of weeks after sowing, I'll sow some more replacements as well, because we're dealing with such a small area. I want every bed that's in production to be in full production at all times, so I'll always have replacements. So this is what I use to feed them: new grow and seaweed, and I'll put in 50 to 100 mils into the 50-liter basin and 30 mils of seaweed. And that's kind of like, I do that by eye as well at this point. So I'll just soak those, and you can just see the difference. They'll just come on really well then, and they'll be really strong. And I might do that once a week at this time of the year. And in the summer, like obviously they grow quicker, and you would probably wouldn't need to feed them as much because they're not in the trays for as long. But yeah. What was this in there? What was this in there? Yeah, so
You were talking.
yeah. So then in the summer I would just soak them in water. I wouldn't feed them, you know, as much because they're growing fast anyway. So like kind of this time of year I want to make sure that they're really strong and just to give them a good start. But yeah, and this is like if I fed them in the summer, like on a Friday, and say on Monday it's been a really hot weekend and they need to be soaked again, I'm not going to feed them. I'm just going to soak them in water. So yeah. So then hardening off. So yeah, just to say, when I sow the trays, I put them on the heat bench and then I take them off the minute they germinate. I don't want to leave them on the heat bench when they've germinated, especially at this time of year, because during the night when there's less daylight hours, they'll get leggy because they'll continue to grow. The heat bench, I always keep that at 20 degrees. I didn't say that. So yeah, that's at 20 degrees. So when they germinate, I'll put them on the side. So these plants, we just transplanted these on Sunday. I have pictures of that as well. But these were supposed to go into the tunnel, but then we didn't want to put them in the tunnel, so they kind of got a bit big. So we put them outside to harden off, and we just put some frost and hail netting on them, and they're totally fine. But behind that, there is broad beans. So what I would have done with them is take them out like for 3 days, just, and then on the third night leave them out. I wouldn't have done this if it was really like freezing windy weather where it's going to like totally traumatize them. If it's a nice day, you can see it's sunny there, so I put them out and I'll just let them kind of get used to the temperature outside, bring them back in, and then transplant them on the yeah, leave them out overnight and then transplant them on the fourth day. So they should be fine then. And with these ones here, this was Sunday, an opportunity to plant before this torrential rain that we're having again this week. So we uncovered these beds here with that tarp that's at the left, and we put the tarp there, and then we just broad fork transplanted those, and we covered them with fleece, so they'll be totally fine. And we have lots of transplants coming along, and anything that we'll check them next week and see if there's any dead ones, because there will likely be some leather jackets or wireworm at this time of year. So we'll just replace them, and we'll kind of look for those pests as we replace them, because you usually find them underneath the dead seedling anyway. So you kind of just have to do that a bit, and hopefully there won't be as many slugs as we had last year. We had an almighty load of slugs last year. We've never had them as bad, but I don't see them as much this year. So, but we're getting a lot of rain, so you never know. So yeah, pest and disease issues. Make sure you've got really good airflow, and use a fan in the summertime when it's really hot. Lettuce, if you're sowing lettuce in the summer, it doesn't like anything over 20 degrees really. It's not going to germinate. So what we do in summer with lettuce is we sow it into the trays and put it straight outside onto the hardening off bench. We don't leave them in the tunnel because they just won't germinate. And yeah, open your doors accordingly and water in the morning. Damping off, we don't really have an issue with damping off. But yeah, if it's kind of grey skies and wet weather, and just wait until the morning and it's sunny before you water them. That's a good tip. And yeah, soak the trays to avoid getting the leaves wet. That's going to help with fungal diseases and stuff like that, and keep your space tidy and weed free. Janet's very good at doing that. I'm not so good, but you wonder why you're getting chickweed in the tunnel, and then you realize there is a load of chickweed in the prop tunnel, and so you have to kind of tidy that up because it spreads. Yeah, strong transplants, less pest pressure. And we get our seeds from those there, brown envelope, Bingenheimer, CN seeds. I was putting in, you have to get a minimum of €250 from CN seeds. Europrize, Gold Crop, and Fruit Hill Farm. Yeah, our Gold Crop is where we get our Salanova, and we got some more seeds now this year from Europrize for the summer that we haven't had before. So I'm gonna try those. And yeah, we get pelleted. It's worth splashing out on the pelleted because it just saves when you're sowing. Yeah, and Fruit Hill Farm's good for seed, and brown envelope is brilliant. We don't grow a massive amount of, obviously salad is our main thing, and orientals and stuff like that. So anything else we don't need a massive amount. So brown envelope is brilliant for us. Yeah, keep your tunnel weed free, clean your trays before stacking, and change the sand every couple of years, and keep the plastic clean. And I think that's all I have to say on that.
And Jenny, you said loads. That was brilliant, and the photos is really good, really inspirational as well, to see the prop area from the build stage and how it's just all put together with recycled materials. Now, I don't see anyone, if anyone has any questions or anything they would like to add or anything they want to share. I don't see anything in the chat. I can't see anybody to know if they're putting up their hands. Let me see. But yeah, and I just, and then the microgreens, Jenny, I presume then, so you kind of implied, so then you have a separate propagation area for microgreens.
Yeah, that's a controlled room. That's where we live at the moment, just beside our garage. So yeah, it's only a small room. I think it's size is it 10 by 10, and it's you can see there in the back we have the sheets of the insulated board, and then we just have a radiator in there and a dehumidifier, and we've our light set up, and we put the lights on at night, and it's a constant 20 degrees. So that's really handy when we want to just start off our tomato seeds and stuff like that. It's a nice room to work in as well, and over the winter when everywhere else is fairly windy and cold and wet.
And absolutely, and as you say, even the logistics of it being near the house as well, it just kind of does keep that connection, doesn't it, and make it easier, keep an eye.
Yeah.
And there's a few questions in now, Jenny, and just one, and thanks, Aoife from Glossary has just said very interesting, and just wondering, why do you change your sand every few years? Is this for pest control?
I don't know. When I was down at Rory in Kildinan Farm down in Cork, that's what he did. So I just kind of, for pest, pest and disease kind of control. You never know, like if some issues might start there, or you do have issues every now and then. This year we had a bit of issue with their winter purslane, black spot on it and stuff, and
I presume funguses and things could probably overwinter and just sit there in sand. So it probably does make sense. And then what plastic do you use to cover beds? It looks stronger than silage cover.
Mypex. Yeah,
Okay.
Mipexes, everything from fruit to the farm.
Yeah. And how many years would you get out of the MyPex?
Oh, we've got 8 years out of most of it so far, anyway, and it's still fine. We look at we what we try to do is when we take up a piece of Mypex, instead of folding it up somewhere, we'll have somewhere to put it. We'll have some more ground to cover.
I get you. And then do you burn the holes as opposed to cut them?
Yeah, we do burn the holes. And another tip that we learned from, I think it was at the OGI conference, a fella from the UK, his mother came up with the idea of putting bird netting or any kind of netting really on top of your Mypex so that the wind kind of blows through it and you don't need as much weight and it doesn't take the whole sheet of Mypex, because we're in a very windy site here, so that has helped a lot. So that's a good tip, to just put some
Blow towards the edge.
and blowtorch, yeah, towards the edge of the Mypex as well, so that to stop it from fraying, because you can get plastic fraying, and that can sometimes. Sorry, I'm trying to find the picture of that. Yeah, so you see the netting there. See that bird netting?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's like brilliant. That's like a game changer. We got that for free from our local hardware store as well. We have a very generous local hardware store.
Oh, tip, make good friends with your local hardware store.
Yeah.
And then Helena in Donegal is just basically wondering about, the infamous slugs, and just on a bad year for slugs, what are your tricks for managing them field scale?
Slug patrol. And so like what we had come up with a really good method of has someone got their speaker on there? It's
Yeah, I'm just trying to see.
so for our salad, we have sheets of Mypex that we burnt holes in, 5 across for lettuce and 4 across for salanova, and we transplanted our lettuce into that, and we found that brilliant because it keeps the moisture in the ground and keeps the weeds away and keeps a good temp, keeps the soil warm as well, so it helps the plants grow, and it keeps the soil cool in the summer as well. But we found that there's just like last year the slugs were just, I've never seen them like that before. They were like snakes. They were all different types, absolutely ginormous and small as well. But so yeah, this year we've planted out our first plants here with no Mypex. So we're just going to, because we're not taking any chances with slugs this year. So that's what we're doing this year. But like as soon as the weather heats up and hopefully it stops raining as much, we'll start to use the Mypex as well. Also, for the slugs, what we do is we're not going to like normally what we would have done if we had like a lot of stuff to mulch in a bed, say if we green manure, like say Phacelia is quite a big plant and there's a lot of debris from it when you mulch it, and then we would cover it. That's basically food for slugs, and that's going to call loads of slugs in under the Mypex to eat it. And then you take that up then and you're going to plant into that and you've loads of slugs. Like what we would have done was manually just remove them and come out at night and done slug patrol. But in order to avoid having them there in the first place, we're not letting the crops get that big and then mulching them and then covering them over the winter. We're kind of like we're making sure that there's not a lot of stuff that needs to break down under the Mypex, so that there's less stuff for slugs to eat.
Yeah, makes sense. And then Molly has just put in a question as well, I suppose. Yeah, pelleted seeds, I suppose, a lot of people, when they think pellet seeds, they're thinking more conventional or, treated with something. So just could you explain?
Oh no, these are organic seeds, and they've just got a little they're a little bit of clay around them basically, and they're just protected by this piece of clay, and they look like little round tiny balls, and they're just really handy for sowing because I'm not dealing with a tiny little salad seed, that's lettuce seed, that's time consuming to sow. And usually pelleted seed are like the top of the range as well. They're the best seed. So you'll get 100% germination all the time as well. So you're guaranteed really good germination.
And price wise, Jenny, are they double the price or
They're, I don't know, they're a lot more that like,
It's still not expensive. No.
yeah. But in this, like our crops, lettuce seeds, our lettuce plants are cut and come again. So like they pay themselves like 100 times over. So in that sense, they're not expensive. But in comparison to a non-pelleted seed, they're very expensive. But they're totally worth it.
and if you're getting bang on 100%.
Yeah, and then like because in the wintertime, our lettuce plants are in the ground for 6 months. We're harvesting those plants for 6 months. So really the cost is negligible.
And then a question here about your tomato seedlings. Just, do you have a timing where you pot them on, or is it just kind of playing whatever the weather, or when do you pot them on, or?
Transplant them into the tunnel, you mean, or pot them on?
The question is from the tomato seedlings in trays. So before they move into the P9s, I think, before
Okay.
potting up.
Okay. So yeah, so they start off in the 150s, and then when they've all germinated, I'll put them up into the 96s, and then when they're in the 96s and they start to crowd each other out, I'm not worried about, like, before I would have thought, oh, if I put them all into 96s, they're going to be leggy because they're all going to fight for space. So I wouldn't have done that. But now I'm doing it because even if they do get a bit leggy, which they don't, you can just bury them deeper into the soil and they'll root at all parts of the stem anyway. So it doesn't really matter. So yeah, so as soon as they start to crowd each other out or start to shade each other out, I can see one plant is not getting any light, then I'll pot them all up into the P9. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what time that is. I just do it by eye.
Yeah, yeah, I feel. And then somebody just wants to know about green manure crops in your beds in rotation. So are ye tilling or no dig, or how are ye incorporating using green manures in the rotation?
We've tried everything, and what we feel works best for us is we kind of use a bit of everything, but so our green manure is like underneath this Mypex here, we would have sowed cereal rye, and you can see some of it there. It's been mulched, and that's some of it there that's been mulched. And that's the one thing that you can sow very late in the year. So these beds would have been in production towards the end of last year. So these might be sown in, I don't know, October. You can even sow in November. And they'll just come on, and we'll just mulch them then. If they get, as they're growing, we'll just keep mulching them, and that goes back in the bed. And then the other day, then on Sunday, I was able to go out with the rotavator, which has a what's it called? Precision depth roller on it. So that's something that you can attach to the back of the BCS rotavator, and it can lift the rotavator up and down. So we just put it at a low, so it's only kind of rotavating the top, and it just turns the rye back into the soil, and then we cover it with the Mypex, and we're hoping that there won't be too much material there for slugs. I don't think so, but it's gonna help it break down quicker because it's mixed into it, rather than if we had just left it on top. And actually, I think it would have attracted more slugs if we just mulched it and put the Mypex straight on top. And the reason that we wanted to turn it back in and make sure that it breaks down is because the cereal rye has some kind of inhibiting growth inhibitor in it, so that if we took these up and it's not broken down properly, and we want to direct sow orientals into it, or we want to transplant spinach, we want to make sure that the cereal rye is totally broke down, so that the growth inhibitor is not present anymore. So I think it takes 4 or 5 weeks for that to be gone. So by rotavating these in, with the weather heating up a bit, these should be ready in that time.
It's great. Jed, Jesus, there's a lot of the questions are coming in hard and fast now. And Kevin Bohan was wondering, have ye or anyone had much success with soil block seedlings?
I've
So-
never used them.
And Jason Horner used to use them. Has anyone else, just to throw it out to the group, has anyone else any comment? I personally have never used them. Yeah, Kevin, sorry. Yeah, sorry, we don't have much input for you on that, but definitely I would say Jason is the man. Like obviously, though it's attractive because you're using less plastic, but I presume the watering and how, yeah, there is a special technique in management, but I'm sure Jason would be up for a chat on that. Loads of positive comments, I have to say, Jenny, coming in as well, just saying what an excellent presentation. And then just a question on Asian salads and lettuce. What percentage mix of seed and potting compost do you use?
For when I'm sowing the orientals, I just use seed compost.
Yeah, the peat-free Klausman.
Yeah, and I only do that in the so for the winter, or for coming into the winter when I've got plants that I'm waiting to take out of the tunnels, I'll want stuff ready for the tunnels, so I'll sow them into seed trays then, and in this, so that when I take the aubergines out, I've got stuff ready to go into the bed straight away. And then in the spring or early at the start of the year, I'll sow orientals again into trays so that I have stuff ready in trays the minute something else finishes in the tunnel. So I've always got stuff coming on. And because when you're supplying supermarkets, you need to have stuff. You need to have stuff all the time. So yeah, so that, but then in the summertime, it's direct sowing always with the orientals. We don't direct sow anything else. We don't direct sow our spinach. It's we don't find
do you use, Jenny, or what do you
a
use?
cedar. We've got a very cheap cedar. It's probably more expensive now, but it was €12 when we bought it. Remember we were very happy to see that Ian Tolhurst, actually, when we visited his farm, uses the same thing. It's one of those hoe garden, is that what it's called? Wolf garden. You know, you see those in all the garden centers. It's just like a round head that you put onto your stick and you just roll it along the ground. And it's great.
Brilliant. And then just, yeah, so just talking there about, obviously, yeah, you're trying to meet a constant supply, and that you referred to, wireworm and just a percentage extra that you would sow every year. So would you calculate that, what percentage extra you need to sow to accumulate, to account for losses? And then would you kind of know the percentage of losses that you've had, or maybe when you were starting out over the years, is it reducing, or is it something that's kind of consistent?
I think it's something that's consistent with wireworms and leather jackets. I would have learned that wireworms will only be there in the beginning when you go from grass to cultivation. But I can be turning the compost and I'll find a wireworm. So I just think they're there and they're here to stay. So you just have to allow for them. But say if I was putting on for a 100-foot bed, I put on I need 6.6 trays. So I'd put on 8 trays. So I've got 1.5 trays kind of extra. And then 2 weeks later, let's say if I've put on so I'm planting 3 beds to begin with, 3 100-foot beds. So for each bed, I'll put on a 3.5 extra. And then 3 weeks or 2 weeks later, I'll sow 5 trays for replacements. And I might not use them, but I want to have them in case I need them. And then if I don't use them, maybe I might put them into the next bed or something like that. Or I might just throw them on the compost. I might even use them, but just for peace of mind, you just always need stuff coming along, because you don't want to be looking for it, because then you're waiting 8 weeks. You're only waiting 4 weeks kind of if you've got stuff.
rather be looking at it than for it, isn't that?
This is it, Kitty, yeah. And then if it's there and you don't want it there, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, well, exactly. And then there's one here now from Connor Macaulay, just wondering how long is too long to keep young plants in a tray if you're not getting around to transplanting them on time.
Um, it depends on the plant, I suppose. Like lettuce can grow really fast and it can get kind of a bit pot bound. But like even if it's in the tray a bit too long, I'll take it out and I'll just like tear the root a bit and then put it into the ground and it'll be grand. I wouldn't just take it out and put it straight into the soil. You know, like I had parsley, or what was it, coriander, one parsley, I think, there before Christmas in trays for weeks and weeks, and I put it into the ground and it's lovely.
It took off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you say, the plants kind of tell you as well, don't they? Or
Yeah, they want to survive, you know.
um, and then regarding cut and come again, plants, roughly how many cuts are you getting before the plant is exhausted? And what's the indicator for ye? Okay, time to stop cutting.
When they start to bolt, I suppose, when they're like, you know, like we give them plenty of water over the winter as well. Like we have our drip lines in the tunnels and we'll water twice a week. Obviously, if it's very cold, we won't, but we make sure to give them water over the winter as well. And yeah, they're fine. They don't get bitter or anything. And as soon as they kind of start to go, or if we're sure that we have enough stuff coming on, then we can get rid of older stuff. But we'll hold on to it as long as we can hold on to it. So I'm not sure exactly. It depends on the time of year, how many cuts you'd get out of things. I think, how many cuts do you get out of Salanova, for example? Two cuts out of Salanova, yeah.
Quality 2 or 3 just for ease of harvest.
Yeah. In the summertime, when things grow faster, you just you get cut, and then you get like say 2 cuts out of Salanova, and then you take it up and you've got new stuff coming on, and you kind of just, and then we've got like a good rotation where we'll put our spinach in after, or we'll put our orientals in. So we always kind of rotate those 3 in the beds over the summer.
Which is great. And Jenny Barry, I think that must answer your question as well. You were looking for some more specific information on Salanova and cuts. And then William Fitzsimons was just wondering about your salad bags and labels.
We get our salad bags from, where are they called? They're in Limerick. IPS, yeah, IPS. We get our salad bags from there, and our labels from Label World, is it?
Yeah.
Label World, yeah. And yeah, they're recyclable. So and we use the same bags for everything. We use the same labels for everything as well. It just cuts costs as well, and we keep our labels basic. You know, there's not much color or anything in them to keep them cheaper, and try to keep costs down like that. Because the product sells itself, we have found always.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it, actually. And then Marianne, so how often are you sowing salads?
That depends on the time of year, but a general rule of thumb is when you transplant, so you know, when you transplant your transplants into the ground, sow more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I presume then over winter, there's probably a cutoff where you do your last year winter sowings for the tunnel, and then there's a few weeks where you just stop sowing for a while.
Yeah, there is. And like what we tend to do is kind of divide the tunnels up as well for the winter. So we'll have stuff ready to harvest coming into the winter, and then we'll transplant stuff that just overwinters, and then it's ready to harvest in the spring.
Okay. And then Aoife in Gloucester was wondering, does anyone have a winter suitable Salanova variety?
I think Barlock's good in winter. Ben is good as well.
Okay.
And we use Zaragoza from Bingenheimer. That's brilliant.
All year round.
That's brilliant all year round. It's excellent.
And when would you sow those?
The Zaragoza. all the time.
year round.
Yeah.
And then Cathal O'Riordan, you have a windy exposed site. So
Yeah.
who supplied your polytunnels?
We got our polytunnels from D Plant in Enniscorthy, Brendan. And yeah, so like generally what people say with polytunnels is that you put them north to south so that you get better even sunlight, but all of ours are east to west and we put them right over against the hedge, and then we planted loads of trees which are all very tall now, and we can close off the tunnels at the back at the west side. So and we just leave them open on the east side all through the winter, really. Like unless it's really bad weather, then we'll close them up. But generally we have them. It's really good for us on a windy site that we're able to close the doors on the west side because it protects the plants and it protects the doors. Our prop tunnel is north to south, and the doors get totally battered in that because they're kind of, you open it and then the wind just like takes it. So we've got like really good yeah, it's better I think east to west for the wind. And we put them up ourselves and buried a couple of some of them, and then the last couple we put them up ourselves, and then we got Brendan out to cover them with plastic, and the plastic isn't buried, and that's totally fine because that's worked out well as well. We've only lost plastic once on one tunnel, and that was Storm Georgina, which came from the east. So we've since put up more hedging to protect from the east because we just had protection from the west.
Great, and thanks, Aoife. You've just put in about Gary Gloss and Connemara. They definitely feel the winds at Polydome, who supplied their tunnels. And guys, that seems to be a lot of the questions dealt with. So I'm just wondering